Hi, Vandana, so nice to see you again. Dr. Shiva, Vandana, on behalf of DiEM25 and personally, it's a great honor and pleasure to be welcoming you today at this DiEM TV episode. I would say that it's quite needless to be introducing you, except maybe highlighting that all throughout your career, from physicist to activist, you have been carrying out restlessly crusades, fights, actions with devotion and commitment and impressive courage, energy, and passion. We last meet at Rio+20 in 2012 at Rio de Janeiro. That very summit produced A Future We Want, that very document, which in fact, we have to be blunt, it's a neoliberal document. There is no mention of food speculation, there is no mention of financial transaction tax, there is no mention of regulating corporations and limiting them. So it's a weak, I would say that it's a weak document and voluntary, and also corporations were quite pleased by the language. Now the next milestone is the Paris Agreement in 2015, and again, better than no agreement, but doesn't provide any blueprint. It's just a hope for climate actions to come. And the only important point is the Article 6, which is still to be developed, in fact, and by the national countries to be setting their own targets, and most likely will be over the next conference of the parties, who knows when. The last summit, Madrid, again, failing in writing down the rule of global markets, carbon markets. Now, so we don't have the future we want. That's quite clear. What did go wrong? Why didn't we succeed? Lack of political willingness, dominant interest of the corporations.
Stefania, I think it's good to go back to where this process started. It started at Rio, at the Earth Summit. And interestingly, that conference was called the UN Conference on Environment and Development, where it was supposed to be balancing ecological imperatives and people's needs and rights. But we managed, in that balance, to create two amazing treaties. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and a treaty on which I made major contributions, and in effect, my life is very much about the Biodiversity Treaty, the Convention on Biological Diversity. It also created two principles that are the foundation of how we live and survive: the polluter pays principle and the precautionary principle. So when you say after 20 years in Rio+20, when the theme was the future we want, I think the reason it went wrong is our commitments to hold what had been agreed in 1992 were already being edged aside. So 92 was 3 years before the WTO. And I remember when people said, don't have different treaties, one in Montreal, one in Bonn, put it together in a new environment program, environment organization, not just a program. And we were told, no, the world can't afford a new organization. And 3 years later, it could afford not just a new organization, but an organization based on the principles of deregulated commerce, profits come first, and greed will be unlimited. Now, those were the precise problems that had caused the climate problem. Those are the problems of limitless growth, limitless greed that had created the problems of erosion at that time of biodiversity. Today, we have to talk about extinction. It's 200 species disappearing a day. At that point, GM soya didn't exist, but today they're burning the Amazon for GM soya. So what went wrong at Rio+20? If you remember, Stefania, there were big marches of people against the new language of the green economy, which was not green in terms of being nature's economy, and not working according to nature's laws of ecology, which are very you can't escape them. You can't escape the nutrient cycle. You can't escape the water cycle. And when you rupture these, that's when you get the climate problem, pollution problem, the water scarcity problem. But for a lot of people, green is the color of the dollar. And that's what went wrong.
Exactly.
And that's continued to go wrong. And for me, it's tragic that now they're talking about nature-based solutions. But nature doesn't, no, nature is what organizes life. We are part of nature. And this nature-based solutions in effect means, oh, we want more energy, we want limitless consumption, let's grow more GM soya and convert it into biofuel. Yeah. And if there's a problem, let's convert some of this into fake food in labs. So the wasteful, ecologically colonizing processes that were to be stopped after the Earth Summit in 1992, not only have they accelerated, but right now, in the middle of this corona lockdown, we are witnessing that here are people waking up saying, new epidemics are related to deforestation. Chronic diseases are related to producing food against nature's laws in production and against our body's health laws in terms of processing. What are we seeing? A real fast forward to a new extractive logic where we ourselves become the new colony. And these are the issues about which I've been writing in these days. And that's my message for the World Biodiversity Day. You know, you don't turn nature into another exploitation source for the solutions of your problems, because with limitless greed, there will never be a solution to your problem. The solution is get rid of greed, get rid of deregulated commerce, allow ecological responsibility and social responsibility and democracy to shape the systems within which business operates. Destroying nature cannot be the business of business.
Absolutely. Vandana, we have been hit, as you were saying, in over these 2 months by this invisible virus, COVID-19, as you're saying that the health emergency is a climate emergency, which is already an economic emergency. And all the emergencies are rooted, in fact, in a mechanicistic and anthropocentric and militaristic system where, as you were saying, man is just separated and superior to whatever he can just own and exploit. Now, finally, in Italy, we're just easing up the restrictions. We've been stuck for 2 months alone. How did India react, the government react to COVID-19? How did national regulations be translated into local ones? And I'm also curious, because I've been reading media reports about India. You know, for us, social distancing, for us Italians, it's not that easy. And I was wondering the same would be in India, but I was reading that you apply them effectively.
Well, first, I actually don't accept the term social distance, because it cannot be a distance between human beings or between human beings and nature. They can be far away. But physical distance, Cartesian distance, doesn't determine social relationships just as little as it doesn't determine our relationship. You know, if you are eating fake food and an impossible burger and thinking you're saving the planet, don't forget the fact that GMO soya is burning the Amazon. GMO soya in the prairies is making the monarch butterfly disappear. So you can't escape these relationships. What is the term, the accurate term is physical distance. And that's what the WHO uses. But for some reason, all governments use social distance. And I want to go into 2 aspects of this, one in the context of India, but one on the context of the future some of the billionaires want. We mustn't ignore the fact that it's not just we who are saying, what should the post-COVID world look like? Citizens are thinking of this everywhere. But the ones who brought us to this mess are also thinking, how can we make the next buck? So in India, you see, that same neoliberal globalization implemented from the 90s basically was designed to destroy India's economy, which is an agrarian economy. We were 75% people on the land. Small farms, biodiverse farms, replenishing the soil fertility, replenishing water, and a food sovereign country. And then we were told, no, you can't grow food for yourself. You should grow food for exports, grow potatoes and tomatoes for chips and Pizza Hut. And we were told, import your food. Well, in the process, very large numbers of farmers were driven off the land. And 400,000 of them were trapped in debt, committed suicide. This has been an area on which I've given a lot of my time, including offering solutions, bringing local seeds back, growing organic cotton. And we have stopped the suicides and debt in the villages where we work. So a large number of people entered the cities in very precarious work. 8 p.m. on the 24th, the lockdown is announced for midnight with no notice. No notice. So for the middle classes, if they have businesses, they got lots of money. If they have government jobs, they're getting their salaries. But these are people who work with their bodies. Their bodies is their instrument of production. They work daily, earn daily, to eat daily. Half of India was literally thrown on the roads, and there was no planning for them. They waited a month thinking something would happen. The government said, we'll give you food, we'll put you in shelters. Nothing happened. And the stories, and there's a very, just like social distancing is a wrong word for physical distancing, working people offering their services to build India's economy, to call them migrant labor, a new word created by the World Economic Forum, Stefania, I just found. I said, where did this word come from? Every Indian is an Indian, and we have mobility, and I can move anywhere in the country and settle down. Nothing can prevent me. And yet suddenly they're called migrant labor, and they've been thrown to the winds. 500 of them have died trying to get to their villages. Some have walked 1,200 miles. They've cycled, they've pushed carts, they've carried babies on their shoulders and old mothers and fathers on their shoulders for thousands of miles. And if this to me is a human miracle, and they are called labor that we don't need anymore. So how is it that half of India, which built India, can suddenly say, we don't need you? I say we are creating a new class of throwaway people. Why are we creating a new class of throwaway people? Because there are 5, 10 tech companies who think that the future by force will be robotic and digital and based on artificial intelligence, and we won't need people. Zuckerberg has said in his Harvard speech, most people will be useless. They're using the term useless. No species on this planet is useless in the web of life. No human being is useless in an economy of care where they are cared for and they care for others. This idea of uselessness is we've extracted as much as we could. We'll throw you away. And to me, that's the challenge for human future. Not just keeping place for everyone and redesigning our economies to fit into nature's economy, not nature-based solutions for the greedy economy, but nature as the foundational economy, a caring economy for sustenance of human beings, and of course a market, but obeying the laws of ecology, obeying the laws of justice. And when you say social distancing, etc., yeah, in the cities you can. But when you are trapped, 100 people in the back of a truck, the very fact that they've got onto a truck is a miracle. In fact, one young man ticked off a journalist who said, you're not bothering about social distance. And this young man said, I've done a BSc. I didn't get a job. So I came and worked as labor in the city. If I'm going back to my village in this truck, you don't have to tell me about social distance, because we are not scared of dying of corona. We are scared of A, dying of hunger, or being brutally beaten by a terrible police system that just has a stick in its hand and just beats everyone they seize, including these people walking back. I refuse to use the word social distance for physical distance, and I refuse to use the word migrant labor for my fellow citizens. They are as deserving of every constitutional right to work, to health, to security, to water, to freedom of mobility. So we are at a cusp, we are at a fork, and this fork is not unique to India. It is a planetary fork because the players, whether it's the virus which became a planetary virus, or the billionaires who are planetary viruses, if you ask me, they are a terrible virus on the planet. We have to somehow, between the virus and the billionaires, find a way for life in its diversity, abundance, freedom to continue to evolve.
Economic and social inequalities, unfortunately, are still there. You were perfectly highlighting it in your in the Earth Day planetary communique that Vandana, your organization, and more than 500 organizations all across the world, 50 countries, have been launched this communique for urging for action, for policy, for politicians to be taking into real consideration the well-being of the planet and of the people. I have seen the video, I watched the video, and it really moved me. The message is very poignant, in fact, and it was also underlined that the function, the importance of indigenous communities. Now, there are very many anthropologists who are just nowadays stating clearly that the future of humankind is relating and depends on listening to indigenous communities, because they know the best how to protect the environment. They are sustainable naturally. And there has been a very useful experimentation that happened in Australia in the 90s. That the Australian government, after a history of marginalizing, have just granting the indigenous community protected areas to be preserving, to be in line with the governmental policies. So indigenous communities, and then there is a kind of new animism which is catching on. I was reading recently an article by The Guardian whose title was, "Should this tree have the same rights as you?" And in fact, the Lake Erie was just extended in Ohio, was just extended the legal rights. And it has happened also in New Zealand for a river, a tributary to the Maori tribe. So do you think that indigenous communities and legal rights for natural resources is the way forward? Shouldn't we reinforce this track?
So, most indigenous cultures, including mine, which has been, India has been such a long-term civilization. And in fact, when Gandhi was asked, what do you think of Western civilization? He said it might be a good idea, that they had to get to civilization because you can't be barbaric against other cultures and call yourself a civilization. All indigenous cultures are based on A, the recognition that we are part of the earth. B, the recognition that we are children of Mother Earth. If we are here, we are alive because she sustains us. And so our Earth Day communique, which is available on the Vandana International website, was basically written with that spirit of not just the fact that across the world, people think this way, but what is beautiful about that communique is that it emerged like emergent phenomena in biology. It emerged. I'd written an essay on the coronavirus, and the Latin American said, we need a statement for Earth Day. And will you draft the first version? Then we had 10 people correcting it and drafting it all over the world. The video was totally made on the initiative of people. And because, the green economy that depends on money to make more money, unlike nature's economy, which depends on life to run life. All of these initiatives ran like indigenous economies do. Nobody gave us a grant. People just had love for the earth and solidarity with each other. Yeah. And this is how indigenous economies have run. I mean, I am so old, Stefania, that I have watched my culture over so many changes. And I have watched societies that had no money, but had the most beautiful jewelry, the most beautiful clothing, the most beautiful houses, without money. And there are cultures where they get locked into money, like the suicides of farmers. They think money will bring them more money when the system is a one-way extraction machine. I see it as a big giant vacuum cleaner. It just takes everything from the earth and it takes everything from people. And so the farmers who think, oh, I'll grow BT cotton, I'll get richer, because that's what the advertisement said, ends up committing suicide. We have to listen to indigenous people. Are the three teachers we need for this moment, the particular moment of the corona crisis and the lockdown, as well as this moment of extinction and climate catastrophe and staring extinction 100 years from now if we don't change our path? The first teacher has to be nature. We have to correct the damage done by people like Bacon and Hobbes and Newton, who declared nature is dead and nature is property. Nature is alive, she's Mother Earth. The second thing we have to do is realize the people who recognize she's living and wrote the laws to govern human society according to laws of nature, whether it be the Amazonian Indians or the Maoris, or the amazing draft declaration we prepared when Evo Morales was president of Bolivia after the failure of the Copenhagen summit. The reason Paris is limping is because the treaty, the binding treaty, was massacred for voluntary commitments. So quite clearly indigenous people have to be teachers. But when Bacon wrote Birth of Masculine Time, he talked about basically defining nature as a woman to be subjugated. And it's women who kept things going, no matter what the crisis, through the wars, through cancer, through unemployment. So women in their caring economy have to be the teachers for all of us to become part of a caring economy. Care for the earth, care for each other, and care for ourselves and our health. And this is what indigenous economies have done. And as you mentioned, Australian Aboriginal people were farming for 60,000 years and left a beautiful continent. And just a few decades of industrial agriculture and colonization trashed Australia, the same as every part of the world. So indigenous people are the bridge to the future. They are not barbarians to be pushed to extinction. Because just like the extinction of bees is our extinction, the extinction of indigenous people is the extinction of all of humanity.
Clearly that the current governance is failing, and this is because very many Green New Deals are sprouting up very often for electoral campaigns. DiEM25 has launched the blueprint for a just transition and the campaign for the Green New Deal. Yanis Varoufakis underlines that it's a radical green agenda in its fundamental, in its principles, and in its approach. Last December, the European coordinators have been sending to the European Commissioner, Ursula von der Leyen, an open letter highlighting that the European Green Deal is not ambitious enough in terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of the economic model itself, which is just based on competitiveness, competition. Now, you are calling for, as you're saying, this Earth Green New Deal. The economy of care. How would it be managed? How would it be financed? How would it be carried out?
Well, I just mentioned when I gave the example of Earth Day community, an example of things that happen without being financed, because people forget that the earth is creative and active, that people, if they decide, can be creative and active. And when they act together, they can create amazing things. I'm doing a dictionary, or an economic dictionary, because I have watched words change meaning very, very fast. Development used to mean the growth of an embryo into a human being, the growth of a seed into an oak tree. And now it means, how can World Bank prescribe solutions? That is not development, that is dictatorship. So a biological term was taken from its self-determining quality to become an economic term of imposition. The word invest was related to care, how to make something very beautiful. I invest in my child, I allow them to flourish. I invest in my land. Indigenous people in India, once I was at a meeting to stop a back box side mine, and this old man just got up and started to leave. And I said, why are you leaving? And he says, the earth is calling me. I have to go beautify the earth. For him, farming, no, not drudgery and horrible. It was his time of a call. And the earth had called him to go beautify her. That was investment. It's when the East India Company was created in 1600. By 1610, in 10 short years, invest became making money. It suddenly changed its meaning. It went, care disappeared. So when you ask me, how can we have an earth, a new deal with the earth? First, I'd like you to remember that the New Deal in 1930 by Roosevelt was because there was a Dust Bowl, which was an ecological crisis. And then there was the Great Depression, a condition that we are entering into according to all predictions because of the violence of lockdown on economic livelihoods. And at that point, there were the robber barons who had to be regulated, and there was public financing. Roosevelt could have said, how do I get the robber barons to finance the Green New Deal, the New Deal? And it wouldn't have worked. It worked because he said, here is public money. I'm going to put it to creating livelihoods and employment in the purpose of regenerating the earth. He called it the conservation core. So the earth was at the center and people's labor was at the center and public financing was at the center. A lot of the Green New Deal language right now is like that Rio +20 event. The green economy of how do you extract new money in a new adjustment. So that kind of Green New Deal ends up being financialization of nature, which is what the BlackRocks want. You know, BlackRock has increased its wealth. $23 trillion is the asset of this big asset management company. It was just 6 trillion before the Corona crisis. So this crisis is making more and money, more money. So if we think money is what drives the world, then we will find solutions that allow the money makers to make more money. If we realize life is what runs the world, then we will use public money, people's contributions, to share in a shift in paradigm, to not have money at the center. As I often say, money is not the currency of life. Life is the currency of life. And I would add, sharing and caring is a basis of a true economy. If we're going to have humanity survive into the future, we'll have to make that shift. Greed will have to be removed, and caring and sharing, recovery of the commons will have to come in. And that doesn't mean we won't need finances, but we won't need dependence on big money for doing the wrong thing, thinking just because it was painted green, somehow there's a solution. Greenwashing cannot be a solution to the ecological catastrophe, the social catastrophe, the economic catastrophe we are facing.
It's not a secret that the word sustainable development has been devised by Henry Kissinger because he wanted to be continuing to, to accelerate, to push the growth, but with giving the illusion of environmental protection. Vandana, you have mentioned before Mahatma Gandhi. There are a few words that you very often bring up in the highlight. I would like to just call them up, and please correct me if I pronounce them wrongly. The first of them is Swadeshi, which means made locally in the framework of deglobalizing. The second one is Swaraj, which means self-organizing, self-governing, therefore responsibility. The third one is Satyagraha, fight for truth, meaning the courage of saying no to injustice. And the fourth one, the most powerful, I would say, is Ahimsa, which means non-violent reason, but to the action, to the violent action. Now, do you think that this failing system is merely due to violence, and that ahimsa, non-violence, would be the solution?
Well, I definitely think violence is at the root of both the destruction of nature, that's violence against the earth, I call it the war against the earth, and whether it's poverty or hunger or unemployment, these are structural violences against people. And then these structural violences get deeper. Violence against women. And this violence against women, has, as all reports show, has jumped 30%. Yeah. At the Food Expo, your former
in Milano.
You know, we were there on the stage, and there was this play on femicide, you know, and these were big concerns. Even then, they've just accelerated. If we think of ourselves as one earth family, and we think of ourselves as one human family, and we realize that these hierarchies that have been created by violent thinking and violent behavior are all constructions, that patriarchy is a construction that assumes women are less than men, that racism is a construction that thinks people with a little more pigmentation of the skin are somehow a problem, and white is superior, or some religions are superior. These ideas of superiority in a world where there is no inequality, there is diversity. A tree is different from a herb, a microbe is not like an elephant, but none of them have an unequal role in maintaining the web of life. And in terms of our different cultures, in terms of our different genders, each of us has an amazing contribution. So ahimsa, as the organizing principle of relationships in a living world, means you realize that whoever it is, it could be a microbe, it could be a plant, it could be an animal, it could be a woman, it could be a child, that they have equal standing. And therefore, they cannot be violated. Awareness of their sovereignty, putting limits on your action, that is non-violence. It's respect for relationships of love, relationships of compassion. So Swaraj is realizing that you must govern yourself, but with the recognition that others also have a right to govern themselves. Colonialism not only will we govern ourselves, we'll govern others also. And Swaraj grew as a language by Gandhi. His brilliant book, Hind Swaraj, he wrote on the ship going from England in 1909, handwritten. And his hand would get tired, he shifted the pen to the other hand. Hind Swaraj has been my Bible for freedom. And if anyone, you know, it's very simply written, it's question and answer, and it's about industrialism being treated as civilization. And he talks of self-organization. But how can I self-organize myself if I don't have values? If I don't understand limits? And where do limits come from? Ahimsa, non-violence. Swadeshi. How can I allow a few factories in England to capture Africans as slaves, capture the land of the indigenous people, put India into slavery, make us dependent on imported cloth while we are slaves to produce the raw materials? Gandhi said, we'll spin our cloth. And I was just writing for, you know, because of the lockdown, here are people going back to the villages. And the village economy has been rendered destitute because of globalization. So I'm asking them to remember Swadeshi. 1905, the movement began that we must produce our own things and we must boycott that which destroys nature, our livelihoods, and our culture. And third, the Satyagraha. With the truth, you know, when Gandhi wrote it, he talked about truth as the law of conscience against unjust law. And when he was dealing with it in South Africa, it was the racist laws that said Indians are inferior to the whites. And when he came back to India, it was salt laws. I have followed it for saying, how can you force us to use GM seeds? We have seed sovereignty and we will not obey your laws. So Satyagraha in his time was basically, you have an obligation to obey higher laws. In our time with the ecological crisis, what I say is, the truth is, we are part of the earth. So anything that ruptures our relationships with the earth and is violent with the earth, we have a duty to not obey that system, not participate in that system, to basically do civil disobedience. Civil disobedience can begin by saying, I will not consume things that destroy the earth. I will not overconsume. I will take what I need. But it also means having the courage to not subject yourself or allow others to be subject to violence. And, I am witnessing that, the part of the lockdown that's related to containing the epidemic is one thing, but the plans to make this lockdown permanent and to displace people forever and impose systems that children should never go to school ever again because they should learn remotely on their computers. No, that's a violence of the right of the child. The right of the child is to education, including in community, forcing everyone into a digital financial economy, cryptocurrency deciding what we are worth. These, I believe, are systems where we have to say, what's the truth of being human? What's the truth of being alive on this earth? That truth is what must guide what I am calling the Satyagraha for life, a civil disobedience against everything that destroys life and freedom, and an upholding of life and freedom as the compass of what should guide us.
Vandana, this morning when I opened up my email box, I received your Earth journey that is going to be, that is for the Biodiversity Day, 22nd of May, now coming. And you are just clearly explaining, saying that there is, you explain patenting and biopiracy. And you say that Microsoft, in the peak of COVID-19, has been granted a patent, like number 000060634, in weaponization, like it's instrumental, but not for the worse and not for the better. Can you explain us more?
Yeah. So I was anyway planning to write a message for World Biodiversity Day because 1987 is when I was at a meeting where the big corporations, the agrochemical, agrotoxin corporations were saying, we will now own the seed, we'll do GMOs, we will patent the seed, and we'll have an international treaty. And I'm sitting and listening to them, and I said, you are trying to create an imperialism over life. I called it bioimperialism. And then I took inspiration from Gandhi to say, if he pulled out the spinning wheel, what should we do in this time? And I said, the seed will be the spinning wheel for today. So while I was going through my journey of having worked on saving seeds, having worked with my government and parliament to write laws that say seeds are not an invention and therefore can't be patented, I'm sent a patent, WO, World Patent 060606. And it is, the para that describes it, talks about mining bodily movement, and the bodily movement includes every brain function of ours, how we are thinking, our blood pressure, how's our blood pressure moving, everything about us, the integrity of our amazing autonomous sacred body is now being defined as a mine for data to be sucked out, and then through processing by algorithms, an assignment made about what we are worth, and a cryptocurrency to be assigned to us. I find this not just as biopiracy, because we are living beings, we are part of biopiracy, we are part of biodiversity, and I have fought and written laws nationally, internationally, that even if you take one part of a plant, it is biopiracy, because the plant has integrity. And therefore you can't take it without permission. Well, if you take data on my bodily movement without my permission, and you create satellites in the sky to police everyone for this mining of data, you're violating my human rights. You're pirating my integrity. And I really see this as that moment that hit me in 1987, where I said, I'm going to give my life for the protection of life on Earth, biodiversity, and the seed. And now that I see, and this is a patent, you know, it's all in black and white. It was granted in the middle of the corona crisis in March. So they have continued while the crisis is there. You know, people can't go to their little corner shop, a bakery can't bake their bread. And while people's livelihoods came to a standstill, I call these the new barons, the new robber barons. They were busy saying, how can we own humanity now? And the way I look at it and the way I've written about it in my blog that's available on the Vandana website, I said, we are being turned into the new colony. Yeah. 500 years ago, the colonies were Latin America, Africa, India. And then Monsanto tried to turn the seed into their colony, and I resisted it. And I'm so grateful. For 33 years, I have dedicated my life to keep the seed free, and movements around the world are absolutely standing there in defense of the seed and its freedom. Now, we are being reduced to the new colony. Our minds and our bodies are being reduced to the new colony. If the older colonialism said, oh, women are less because they're bodies without minds, you know, and the patriarchs can control them because they have minds, and their minds have escaped the body, which is what Descartes wrote. Right now, they say both your mind and your body is ours to mine. We've been reduced to colonies and data mines. And then they're telling us, not only will they police every movement of ours, every feeling of ours, they're even going to give us value. And as I said in the beginning, there's nothing like a useless person. There's nothing like a person whose value is less. Why do we have a human rights declaration that all human beings have equal rights? It came out of the Nuremberg trials. It is really a result of realizing that no human being has a right to treat other human beings with violence. That too, Hitler's Germany was about violence. This is a different, more subtle form of violence, and it is time for humanity to really, everyone consciously, every community consciously, to say, who are we? What is this beautiful earth? What future do we want? And which future will we say no to through the highest satyagraha that humanity has been asked to engage?
There are a number of questions which have been arriving, and I put my read because it really moved me. The last two sentences of this Earth journey that you sent the link to us, that I have forwarded to our DiEMers comrades, by the way. It's very strong. It says, 33 years ago, when I heard the poison cartel wanting to own seeds, I took a pledge to dedicate my life to the protection of our biodiversity and to the seed of freedom. On this Biodiversity Day, I pledge to dedicate the rest of my life to protection of all life, the freedom of all beings, and human freedom. That's our very powerful words. Vandana.
Well, that is my commitment. That is totally my commitment, even in lockdown.
The first question that I get, how would you comment on Michael Moore's Planet for the Humans?
Well, I think at one level, the title tells you that, doesn't it? It's basically saying the planet is for all beings, but here is a thinking that is just for humans. And, you know, he's talked about the very heavy footprint of miracle solutions that a lot of people think are a solution. But he, you know, as my own thinking has always been, you have to take the full ecological footprint. So if you're bringing solar, or you're bringing biofuel, or you're bringing whatever, you have to assess, how does the system work in relationship to the earth as a system? and society as a system. And that's what the film really is about. I think some people have misunderstood it, but I think it is a wake-up call to say, this money-driven green economy is not going to be the solution. An ecologically conscious shift in our production systems, our consumption systems, and our awareness of us being part of a living earth, that we are alive and the earth is alive, that shift. So in a way, I hope this film will let people realize that humans are for the planet is not for humans.
And by the way, Vandana, in this very movie, you just come out to be one of the fewest real environmentalists. You say the truth about biomass in that very movie. We have to say that.
Well, I was on the climate march. I was marching on the climate march when that person has interviewed me, because I remember that setting. So I was very much there in solidarity. But when they asked me about biofuels, I told them about the fact that biofuels take more fossil fuels than they substitute, but worse, they take food away from people. They're growing soya in the Amazon. They're making all of Europe a biofuel economy. I don't see food when I come to Europe anymore. It's corn and canola, corn and canola, corn and canola. It's for the biofuel economy because of the subsidies. The subsidies are bigger in biofuel than they are for growing food.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we are still there. We should be changing this pattern. Another question. Can Vandana address the topic of geoengineering? Most environmentalists want to ignore it as it does not exist. Geoengineering.
Yeah. So, my book, which is available in Italy, Oneness versus 1%, which in the Italian title from Feltrinelli is The Planet is for All. Yeah. I started to think about it in 2015, because I had been in Copenhagen and wrote my book Soil.oil to saying the soil was being forgotten, agriculture was being forgotten, industrial farming and industrial food systems and globalized food systems were leaving a heavy footprint, and 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions, if you include the CO2, the nitrous oxide and the methane, are coming from this system of producing bad food, which also creates diseases. So it's not functioning as a food system. So I was in Paris and I witnessed Bill Gates strutting around on the stage with heads of state, offering two solutions to the climate crisis: geoengineering and genetic engineering. So I realized something had shifted. And that's when I did the book, because I wanted to understand the shift. The understanding of ordinary people is, here are democracies, people vote for governments, governments are elected, they're sovereign, they then regulate businesses and protect us. But deregulation of commerce through WTO and free trade meant that some players shut up. So e-commerce gained over local shops, and now Jeff Bezos is going to be a trillionaire in a few years and became richer by 24 billion during the lockdown. Bill Gates, the first decision of WTO was to make movement of information and software tax-free. If he had paid taxes on that, he wouldn't have become the empire he is. And of course, the patent. And here he was, walking on that stage, pushing geoengineering as a solution. Geoengineering means he thinks he has a right to deliberately alter. You see, the people from fossil fuels, from the coal industry, altered the climate as a side effect. It is already a crime, but he wants to do it deliberately, pretending it's a solution to climate change. How can a wrong action amplified correct another wrong action? So geoengineering is, A, he thinks he's master of the universe. Two, I have debated lots of geoengineers, and they use stupid ideas like this. If we blanket the earth with pollution, with sulfur particles and clouds, the sun won't come in. I say, A, the sun is not the problem. Pollution is the problem. So don't make sun look the problem. Secondly, what is going to happen if the sun doesn't shine? To photosynthesis, to plants, to forests, to trees. What's going to happen when those chemicals you have used to alter the climate come down and rain toxics on our farms? And every one of them have said, my project is about temperature management, not about plants. And that separation, that mechanistic thought allows the irresponsibility of trying to play God.
Your favorite friend is Monsanto, isn't it? You gain worldwide attention fighting for Monsanto. The question is, how do we stop them from controlling food production?
Well, you know, my favorite friend used to be Monsanto from the late 80s till recently, but then Monsanto got eaten up by Bayer. So there is no Monsanto really now, there's a Bayer. Now Bayer was part of IG Farben. And even during Hitler's time, they had a joint company called Mobilize. So they've consolidated again. There are 4 companies, I call them the poison cartel: Bayer, Monsanto, Syngenta, ChemChina, Dow, DuPont, and BASF. They created the problems then, they're creating the problems now. They're controlling seed, they're controlling agri-chemicals, they want to control climate. Monsanto bought the Climate Data Corporation, and Bill Gates, who's inherited all the failures of Monsanto. We threw out GMO BT aubergine. We threw out golden rice. Bill Gates has picked up these failed Monsanto projects, financed them to give them life. Both Monsanto, Bayer, and Bill Gates are now talking about farming without farmers. Bill Gates is financing food without farming. He is a big financier of fake food. GM soya now used to extract proteins and carbohydrates to reconstitute them through genetic engineering back bacteria in labs, and they want us to volunteer for this. I don't think people will, and I believe that the reason the supply chains have been allowed to collapse in the lockdown is because they want to create a system of desperation, so people will accept anything when there's no food. That's why growing gardens and growing our own food is the most revolutionary thing we can do at this point. Not only to prevent us being force-fed with fake food and toxic food, but also to retain our humanity, that when we work with the soil with our hands, we realize our humanity comes from the earth. It's not an accident that human is derived from humus, which is the word for soil.
I still have time for last question, please, because I love this one. How can precarious citizens practice civil disobedience when they struggle taking care of their families and they can't afford to buy fair trade food? How can they live ethically?
Yeah, I think the place to begin, if you're in a precarious situation, or even if you're not in a precarious situation, is to remember, A, we are members of the earth. So, second, we are part of community, because neoliberalism has hammered on our idea of being members of community. And Margaret Thatcher said there's nothing like a society, they're only individuals. And social distancing is in effect an engineering of fragmenting us further. You never stand together. I've also been told it's partly because when they want to watch our body movement through these sensors, you know, if 3 people are standing together, the signals get a bit confused. So in a way, social distancing is actually preparing us to be raw materials for this whole surveillance capitalism, as a Harvard economist has said. I think we have to, if we can reclaim 3 things, we won't be precarious. First, we are part of the earth. Let's go back to her. She's calling us. Find a community to create a garden. Find a community. Even in the war, there were victory gardens. This is a war against the earth. let's find community gardens. Secondly, let's reclaim the commons. They have been appropriated. Let's reclaim them. There is no dearth of land. It's just that it's gone for the wrong things. It's growing biofuel. When the 2008 crisis hit, and people in Italy, Greece, young people would ask me, you know, they've destroyed everything, they've taken our work. I'd say, grow food, grow a garden. And they're doing that. They've created entire new communities. Third element of that is this entire industrial model made us look down on bodily labor and made us think that using only our heads was superior. Now they're saying, you know, we don't even need your heads. We don't need your minds also. You're redundant totally. Our bodies are amazing. Our bodies are amazing, self-regulating, self-defined systems, complex, 60 trillion microbes in our gut, 600 trillion viruses going through us all the time. This declaration of war against microbes, you know, I think of it, I say, oh, first they declared war against women and did the witch hunting. Then they declared war against indigenous people and tried to colonize us. Then they declared war against insects and used Hitler's chemicals to kill insects. And now they're declaring war against microbes, but we are microbes. We are made of microbes. 90% of every human being is microbes. So let's create new friendships with soil microbes, with microbes in our gut. Let's grow our knowledge together. Let's reclaim the beauty of being human, the beauty of being on this earth, and remove every deficiency that has forced us into a precarious place, to celebrate life in her abundance, in her community, in her sharing, in her oneness.
Vandana, in one of your last interviews, you said, I'm an optimist by nature. There is not such a thing like certain and fixed frame. Everything is just evolving and changing towards transformational path. Let's join together hands, hearts, and heads. So what's the first, just by concluding, but just what's the first step for that?
Yeah, so most of us have been told we don't have heads. We all do. But the head, as intelligence and the mind, is not just sitting here. Every part of our body is intelligent. Our gut is being called the second brain. So when I say head, I mean mind. I mean the consciousness that's flowing through every part of us. When I talk hands, I'm talking about the creativity of the human being. And when I talk heart, I'm talking about the fact that we are compassionate beings. We are related beings. And when you're related, then compassion has to flow from you. So the reason we can't be in despair is because life is so beautiful. And life is just waiting to be lived. And there's an invitation from life, there's an invitation from the earth, and there's an invitation from the future. As I say, the only thing we have to shed is chains, invisible chains of new dictatorships, old chains of captive minds and pollutions of the mind, and really experience what being human is about. And as I'm writing in my new book, it's the true economy is the economy of giving. As St. Francis said, it's only in giving that you receive. And all of nature works by giving. Nature does not work by saying, the bee doesn't tell the flower, I'll pollinate you if you give me so much bread. She pollinates. And the flower offers her pollen. This mutual giving in generosity is the head, heart, and hand coming together in every being in the art of giving.
So Vandana, thank you immensely for this talk.
Thank you, Stefania. It was a joy.
And we will join hands, heads, and hearts together like a butterfly effect for a transformation of the earth, hopefully. Namaste.
Absolutely. Yes, together. Yeah. And the lockdown is not a social distance. We will be more united.
Physical.
coming out. We will be more together coming out.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you so much.
Lovely.
Yeah.